The rope was already being cut when Josephine Allen heard the first whisper that would destroy her life. Standing in the general store with flour dust, still clinging to her apron, and the summer heat of 1883 pressing through every crack in the wooden walls of Winnetka, California. She had come to this dusty settlement 6 months ago with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a fierce determination to make something of herself after her parents died of fever back in Missouri. The town had welcomed her cautiously at first, but her skill with a needle and her gentle manner had won people over. She had set up a small seamstress shop in a room behind the boarding house, and slowly, carefully, she had built a life. Women came to her for their Sunday dresses, their wedding gowns, their children's clothes. She worked long hours by lamplight, her fingers moving with practiced precision, creating beauty from simple fabric. But that morning, standing at the counter waiting for her order of thread, she heard Margaret Thornton's voice drift from the back corner where the woman stood with 2 other ladies from the church social committee. "I saw them together," Margaret was saying, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "Behind the saloon, practically in each other's arms, bold as brass, and him a married man with 3 children." Josephine's blood went cold. She knew instinctively, with a terrible certainty, that Margaret was talking about her. She turned slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Mrs. Thornton," she said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "If you have something to say about me, I would appreciate you saying it to my face." Margaret turned, and there was something ugly in her expression, something that made Josephine think of a cat with a mouse cornered. "Well, if the shoe fits, Miss Allen. Though I suppose you cannot deny what half the town saw yesterday evening." "I was working until well past dark yesterday," Josephine said. "I did not leave my shop except to walk directly to the boarding house for supper." "That is not what I heard," Margaret said, and the 2 women beside her nodded, their faces hard with judgment. "I heard you were seen with Thomas Brennan, and his wife only just recovered from birthing their youngest." The accusation hit Josephine like a physical blow. Thomas Brennan was the town banker, a man she had spoken to perhaps 3 times in her entire life, always in the presence of others, always regarding payment for work she had done for his wife. The idea that she would carry on with him, with any married man, was so absurd it would have been laughable if it were not so dangerous. "That is a lie," Josephine said, her voice shaking now with anger. "A complete and utter lie, and you know it." But Margaret's smile only widened. "Do I? Well, I suppose time will tell what the truth is. Come along, ladies. I do not think we should be seen associating with women of questionable character." They swept out of the store in a rustle of skirts, and Josephine stood frozen, aware of the storekeeper watching her with new wariness in his eyes. She gathered her thread with trembling hands and walked back out into the bright California sunlight, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. By afternoon, the lie had spread through Winnetka like wildfire through dry brush. Women who had smiled at her that morning crossed the street to avoid her. Mrs. Henderson came to collect the dress Josephine had been working on for her daughter, and informed her coldly that her services would no longer be needed. When Josephine went to the post office, the postmaster handed her mail through the window without meeting her eyes, and she could hear the whispers starting up again the moment she turned her back. She wanted to defend herself, to proclaim her innocence from the rooftops, but she quickly learned that denials only seemed to confirm guilt in the minds of people who had already decided what to believe. Margaret Thornton was a powerful woman in Winnetka, the wife of the largest landowner in the county, and if she said something was true, most people were inclined to believe her. By the second day, Josephine's shop was empty. No customers came. When she went to buy groceries, The grocer told her he preferred to serve customers of good moral standing. She spent that night lying awake in her small room, listening to the sounds of the boarding house around her and wondering how her life had fallen apart so quickly. She did not know that Margaret's lie had been born of jealousy so petty, it was almost incomprehensible. Thomas Brennan had mentioned, in passing at a town meeting, that the seamstress who had made his wife's new dress was remarkably talented. He had said it innocently, a simple compliment, but Margaret had seen the way other women had looked at Josephine afterward, with new respect, and something small and mean in Margaret's heart had twisted. She had been the undisputed queen of Winnetka society for 15 years, and she would not tolerate any potential rival, especially not some orphan girl from Missouri with no family and no connections. On the third day, someone threw a rock through Josephine's shop window. She was sweeping up the glass when she heard the footsteps on the wooden sidewalk outside. She looked up, expecting more trouble, but instead she saw a man she recognized only vaguely, a cowboy who worked on one of the ranches outside town. She had seen him in town before, always quiet, always keeping to himself. He was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of the sky before a storm. He wore the typical garb of a working cowhand, dusty trousers and a faded shirt, a worn hat pulled low against the sun. "Miss Allen," he said, removing his hat. "I am Samuel Reeves. I work at the Double C Ranch about 5 miles west of here." "Mr. Reeves," she said warily, "if you have come to add your voice to the chorus, I would prefer you just move along." "No, madam," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. "I came because I was in town the evening they are talking about. I saw you leave your shop and walk straight to the boarding house. You were carrying a basket of mending, and you stopped to help old Mr. Chen pick up some papers that had blown away. Then you went inside and did not come out again. I know for a fact you were not behind the saloon with Thomas Brennan or anyone else." Josephine felt her throat tighten with sudden emotion. "You saw me?" "Yes, madam, and I have been asking around. Nobody actually saw you with Brennan. It is all just rumor started by Mrs. Thornton, passed along by people who did not witness anything themselves. But by now it has taken on a life of its own. Will you tell people?" Josephine asked, hating the desperate hope in her voice. "Will you tell them what you saw?" Samuel's expression was grim. "I already tried, madam. Mrs. Thornton called me a liar, said I was trying to protect you because I had designs on you myself. Others said I must have been drunk or mistaken about the day. The truth is, when people want to believe a lie, they will find any excuse to keep believing it." Josephine sank down onto a stool, the broom falling from her nerveless fingers. "Then what am I supposed to do? This is my livelihood. This is my life. They are destroying it over something that never happened." Samuel was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. "You could leave," he said finally. "Start over somewhere new, somewhere nobody knows Margaret Thornton's lies. Leave." Josephine laughed bitterly. "And go where? I barely have enough money saved to last another month, and without customers I will not earn more." "I have nowhere to go, Mr. Reeves." "I might have an idea about that," Samuel said slowly, "but it would mean trusting me, and I know you have no reason to do that." Josephine looked at him for a long moment, studying his face. There was something solid about him, something honest in the way he met her gaze without flinching. She had learned to read people in her years of working with customers, to see past their words to their intentions, and everything she saw in Samuel Reeves told her he was telling the truth. "What is your idea?" she asked. "My brother runs a freight company in San Francisco. He is always looking for people who can sew to repair tarps and make cargo covers, tents, that sort of thing. It is not fancy work, but it pays steady. I could write to him, Ask if he has a position available. If he does, I could take you there. I am due for a break from ranch work anyway, and I have been meaning to visit him." "Why would you do that?" Josephine asked. "You do not even know me." Samuel put his hat back on, shading his eyes. "Because what they are doing to you is not right, and if nobody stands up against it, then this town is not the kind of place I want to be." He paused. "And because I know what it is like to be falsely accused. My father was hanged for a crime he did not commit when I was 16. I could not save him, but maybe I can help you." The raw honesty in his voice made Josephine's eyes sting with unshed tears. "I am sorry about your father." "Me too, madam. So what do you say? Will you let me help you?" That night, lying in bed, Josephine made her decision. Staying in Winnetka would be slow death. Margaret Thornton had made sure of that. Even if Josephine somehow managed to clear her name, the stain would remain. People would always wonder, always whisper. She would never have the life she had been building, the respect she had worked so hard to earn. But leaving meant putting her trust in a stranger, a cowboy who claimed to want to help her out of simple decency. It meant abandoning the small security she had managed to create and setting out into the unknown. In the end, it was not much of a choice at all. She met Samuel at dawn 2 days later at the edge of town, carrying everything she owned in her old carpet bag and a bundle wrapped in cloth. He had a sturdy horse and a pack mule loaded with supplies. He had tied a gentler mare beside his own mount. "For you," he said. "She is steady and will not give you trouble." "I cannot pay you for her," Josephine said. "Did not ask you to. She is borrowed from the ranch. I will bring her back eventually." They rode out of Winnetka as the sun climbed over the eastern hills, turning the dusty streets gold. Josephine did not look back. The journey to San Francisco would take them more than a week, Samuel explained as they rode. They would follow established trails, stopping at way stations and small settlements along the route. He had made the journey several times before and knew the safe places to camp. The first day passed in near silence. Josephine was too raw, too hurt to make conversation, and Samuel seemed to understand that. He kept them moving at a steady pace, pointing out landmarks occasionally, but mostly leaving her to her thoughts. That evening, they camped near a small creek, surrounded by oak trees that provided welcome shade. Samuel built a fire and cooked a simple meal of beans and bacon, and they ate watching the sun set over the rolling California hills. "I keep thinking I should have fought harder," Josephine said suddenly, breaking the silence. "That I should have made them listen, made them see the truth." Samuel poked at the fire with a stick. "Sometimes the truth does not matter as much as we want it to. Sometimes people have already made up their minds and nothing you say will change them." "That seems like a terrible way to live." "It is," Samuel agreed. "But it is also the way things are sometimes. My father tried to prove his innocence right up until they put the noose around his neck. He died knowing he had not done what they accused him of, but that did not stop them from killing him." "What was he accused of?" "Stealing cattle from the ranch where he worked. The owner's son was the real thief, but when the count came up short, he blamed my father. My father was just a hired hand, no family, no connections, easy to sacrifice." Samuel's voice was flat, emotionless, but Josephine could hear the old pain beneath it. "I tried to find proof, tried to make people listen, but I was just a kid. Nobody cared what I had to say." "I am so sorry," Josephine said softly. "It was a long time ago. But it taught me that sometimes the best you can do is walk away, start over somewhere the lies cannot follow you." He looked at her across the fire. "That is what I am hoping for you, a fresh start." They traveled for 8 days through the varied landscape of California. The journey took them through rolling grasslands dotted with oak trees, past ranches where cattle grazed and cowhands waved as they passed. They stopped at a way station run by a cheerful Mexican family who fed them enchiladas and let them sleep in a clean barn. They crossed rivers and climbed hills, and slowly, gradually, Josephine began to relax. Samuel was easy company once she got used to his quiet ways. He did not talk much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and genuine. He had grown up in Texas, he told her, working ranches since he was old enough to sit a horse. After his father's death, he had drifted west, working wherever he could find employment. He had been at the Double C Ranch for 2 years, the longest he had stayed anywhere since leaving Texas. "Why do you keep moving?" Josephine asked one evening as they camped beneath a sky full of stars. Samuel considered the question. "I suppose I have been looking for a place that feels like home, somewhere I could put down roots, build something lasting, but I have not found it yet." "Maybe you will find it in San Francisco." "Maybe," Samuel said, but he did not sound convinced. As they traveled, Josephine found herself noticing things about Samuel she had not seen at first. The way he always made sure she had enough to eat before he ate himself. The way he positioned their camps to give her privacy and safety. The way he spoke to her with respect, never talking down to her or treating her like a burden. He had calloused hands and a weathered face, but his eyes were kind, and there was a gentleness in him that seemed at odds with his rough cowboy exterior. On the 5th night, they stopped at a small town called Los Robles to resupply. While Samuel was at the general store, Josephine waited outside, watching the activity on the street. A woman came out of the dress shop across the way and stopped when she saw Josephine. "Excuse me," the woman said, approaching. "I could not help but notice your dress. The embroidery on the collar is exquisite. Where did you get it?" Josephine looked down at her dress, one of the few nice things she owned which she had made herself. "I made it," she said. The woman's eyes widened. "You made it? Oh my. I run the dress shop here, and I have been looking for someone with that kind of skill. My seamstress just moved away to be with her daughter. I do not suppose you would be interested in work." For a moment, Josephine was tempted. Here was a chance to stop running, to settle down again, to rebuild. But then she thought of Winnetka, of how quickly everything had fallen apart, and she shook her head. "I am sorry," she said. "I am on my way to San Francisco. I already have employment arranged there." The woman looked disappointed but handed Josephine a card anyway. "If things do not work out, please write to me. I would be very interested in discussing an arrangement." When Samuel returned, Josephine told him what had happened. He listened quietly, then said, "If you want to stay here, I would understand. You do not owe me anything." But Josephine shook her head. "No, I said I would go to San Francisco, and I will. Your brother is expecting me, and besides—" She hesitated. "I feel safer with you." Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, an emotion she could not quite name. "I am glad," he said simply, and they continued on. The landscape changed as they drew closer to the coast. The air grew cooler, and fog rolled in during the mornings, burning off by midday. They could smell the salt tang of the ocean before they could see it, and when they finally crested a hill and saw San Francisco spread out before them, Josephine caught her breath. The city was enormous, sprawling across hills and down to a harbor filled with ships. Buildings rose up in tiers, and she could see the smoke from countless chimneys, hear the distant sounds of industry and commerce. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. Samuel led them down into the city, navigating the crowded streets with practiced ease. They passed grand hotels and rough saloons, fancy shops and ramshackle warehouses. Finally, they arrived at a large building near the waterfront with a sign that read Reeves Brothers Freight and Shipping. Samuel's brother Stephen was a larger, louder version of Samuel, with the same storm-gray eyes but a readier smile. He swept Samuel into a crushing hug, then turned to Josephine with undisguised curiosity. "So, you are the seamstress Sam wrote about," he said. "Welcome to San Francisco, Miss Allen. I hope my brother has not been too dull a traveling companion." "He has been very kind," Josephine said. "Well, that is Sam for you. Cannot get 3 words out of him on a good day, but he is steady as they come." Stephen clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Come on, let me show you around the operation." The freight company was impressive. Stephen employed nearly 20 men, and their business was thriving. He showed Josephine the warehouse where they stored cargo, the office where they arranged contracts, and finally, a large room where canvas and rope and other materials were kept. "This is where you would work," Stephen said. "We go through tarps and canvas covers faster than we can replace them. They tear, they wear out, they get stolen. If you can patch them and make new ones when needed, I will pay you fair wages and provide a room upstairs. It is not fancy, but it is clean and secure." Josephine examined the materials, running her hands over the heavy canvas. It was different from the delicate fabrics she was used to working with, but the principles were the same. "I can do this," she said. "Excellent. When can you start?" "Tomorrow, if you like." "I like your attitude, Miss Allen. Welcome aboard." That evening, Stephen insisted they join him for dinner at his home, a comfortable house in a respectable neighborhood. His wife Clara was a warm, friendly woman who immediately put Josephine at ease. Over a meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, Josephine learned that Stephen and Clara had 2 young children, and that they had built their freight business from nothing over the past 10 years. "Sam helped us get started," Clara said, smiling at her brother-in-law. "He worked for us for nearly a year when we were just beginning, would not take a penny in wages, said it was family obligation." Samuel looked uncomfortable with the praise. "You would have done the same for me." "Maybe, but we would not have made it without you." Stephen raised his glass. "To Sam, who always shows up when you need him." They all drank, and Josephine felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the wine. This was what family looked like, she thought. Not blood relation necessarily, but people who cared for each other, who showed up and helped without expecting anything in return. After dinner, Samuel walked Josephine back to the freight office where she would be staying. The city was alive with nighttime activity, gaslights glowing in windows, the sound of music drifting from saloons and theaters. "Thank you," Josephine said when they reached the door, "for everything. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Samuel said. "I am just glad I could help. What will you do now? Will you stay in San Francisco?" Samuel looked out at the city, his expression thoughtful. "I am not sure. Stephen always has work if I want it, but I have never been much of a city person. I might head back to the Double C, or I might try to find something else. I have been thinking it might be time to stop drifting, to find a place to settle." "I hope you find it," Josephine said, and she was surprised by how much she meant it. Somewhere during their journey, this quiet cowboy had become important to her, and the thought of him leaving left an unexpected hollow in her chest. Samuel tipped his hat. "Good night, Miss Allen. I am sure I will see you before I head out." But as he walked away, Josephine found herself wishing he would stay. She settled into her new life with determined focus. The work was harder than she was used to, the canvas thick and resistant, her fingers aching by the end of each day. But it was satisfying in its own way, and Stephen was a fair employer who appreciated her skill. Within a week, she had caught up on the backlog of repairs and was working on new covers for an upcoming shipment. Samuel stayed in San Francisco. He told himself it was because Stephen needed extra help with a large contract, but the truth was more complicated. He had never been one to form attachments easily, but something about Josephine Allen had gotten under his skin. Her quiet strength, the way she had refused to let her circumstances break her, the gratitude in her eyes when she looked at him, all of it drew him in ways he did not fully understand. He took a room in a boarding house not far from the freight office and started working for his brother. The work was different from ranch life, more loading and hauling than riding and roping, but it kept him busy. And it meant he saw Josephine every day. She was always bent over her work when he came through the warehouse, her dark hair pulled back, her needle moving with steady precision. Sometimes she would look up and smile at him, and he would feel something warm unfold in his chest. They fell into a pattern. Samuel would stop by her workroom during his breaks, and they would talk. Small things at first, observations about the city, stories about the characters who worked at the freight company. But gradually, their conversations deepened. Josephine told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents who had loved her fiercely and taught her to stand on her own. Samuel told her about growing up on ranches, about the vast Texas sky and the freedom of open country. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after they arrived in San Francisco, Samuel found Josephine staring out the window with tears on her cheeks. "What is wrong?" he asked, alarmed. She wiped her eyes quickly. "Nothing. I am being foolish. Tell me." She hesitated, then said, "I got a letter from a woman I knew in Winnetka, one of the few who was kind to me. She said things have gotten worse. Margaret Thornton has been spreading more lies, saying I ran off with a cowboy, that it proves I was guilty all along. And Thomas Brennan's wife is distraught because people keep bringing up the rumor. That poor woman is suffering because of a lie, and there is nothing I can do about it." Samuel felt anger rise in him, hot and fierce. "That is not your fault. But it is happening because of me, because Margaret decided to destroy me." "No," Samuel said firmly. "It is happening because Margaret Thornton is a cruel woman who cares more about power than truth. You are not responsible for her actions or their consequences." Josephine turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression that made Samuel's heart ache. "How do you stay so steady? After everything that happened to you, to your father, how do you keep from being bitter?" Samuel thought about it. "I suppose because being bitter would not change anything. It would just make me miserable. I cannot fix what happened to my father, but I can try to be the kind of man he wanted me to be. Honest, decent, willing to help when I can. That is all any of us can do." "You are a good man, Samuel Reeves," Josephine said softly. "I try to be," Samuel said. He wanted to say more, to tell her that she was the reason he was staying in San Francisco, that somewhere between Winnetka and here he had fallen for her. But the words stuck in his throat. She had been through so much already. The last thing she needed was him complicating her life further, but Clara noticed, even if Samuel would not admit it. A few weeks later, she invited both Samuel and Josephine to Sunday dinner and seated them next to each other. Throughout the meal, she asked questions designed to draw them out, to make them talk about their hopes and dreams. "So, Miss Allen," Clara said over dessert, "are you settling in well?" "You like San Francisco?" "Very much," Josephine said. "Everyone has been so kind." "It is a fresh start, just like I needed." "And are you thinking of staying long term, or is this just temporary?" Josephine glanced at Samuel, then away. "I have not decided yet. I suppose it depends on how things go." "Well, we certainly hope you will stay," Clara said warmly. "You have been such an asset to the business. And I think you have been good for Sam, too. He seems happier since you arrived." Samuel shot his sister-in-law a warning look, but Clara just smiled innocently. That night, walking Josephine home again, Samuel finally found the courage to speak. "Clara is not wrong," he said abruptly. "I am happier since you arrived. I know that probably sounds forward, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable, but I think you should know." Josephine stopped walking and turned to face him. The gaslight cast shadows across her face, but he could see her expression clearly. "I am glad you said that," she said quietly, "because I have been happier too. You make me feel safe, Samuel. Not just physically safe, though that too, but safe to be myself, to not have to pretend or perform. I can just be Josephine, and that is enough for you." "You are more than enough," Samuel said, his voice rough. "You are remarkable, and I am honored to know you." "Then why have you not said anything before?" "Because I did not want to presume. You have been through so much, and I did not want to add to your burden. If you do not feel the same way, I will understand. I will not make things awkward, I promise." Josephine reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm in his. "I do feel the same way," she said. "I have for a while now. I just did not know if you were staying or leaving, and I did not want to care for someone who was going to disappear." "I am not going anywhere," Samuel said. "Not if you do not want me to." "I do not want you to," Josephine said. "I want you to stay." Samuel pulled her closer, and she came willingly, resting her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there under the gaslight, holding each other while the city moved around them. "I think I started falling for you the moment you showed up at my shop with your hat in your hands, ready to help a stranger," Josephine murmured. "You were my answer to a prayer I had not even spoken yet." "I was just doing what was right," Samuel said. "No," Josephine said, pulling back to look at him. "You were doing more than that. You were being kind when kindness seemed impossible. You believed me when no one else would. You gave me hope when I had none left. That is not just doing what is right. That is being extraordinary." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Josephine breathed, and he did. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Their courtship unfolded slowly, carefully, two wounded people learning to trust again. Samuel continued working for his brother, and Josephine continued her sewing, but now they spent every spare moment together. He took her to see the sights of San Francisco, the grand buildings and the bustling markets, the view from the hills looking out over the bay. She introduced him to the simple pleasure of sitting quietly together, reading or talking or just being. Stephen and Clara watched with obvious approval. "I have never seen Sam like this," Stephen confided to Josephine one day. "He has always been so guarded, so careful about letting anyone close, but with you, he is different, lighter somehow." "He makes me feel the same way," Josephine said, "like I can breathe fully for the first time in months." 3 months after they arrived in San Francisco, Samuel asked Josephine to marry him. They were sitting on a bench overlooking the bay, watching the ships come and go, when he turned to her and said, "I know it has not been long, but I also know my own heart. I love you, Josephine Allen. I want to build a life with you, a real life with a home and a future. Will you marry me?" Josephine's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Reeves. I love you too." They were married a month later in a small ceremony at Stephen and Clara's house. The freight company employees came and some neighbors, and it was simple and perfect. Josephine wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue with white lace, and Samuel wore his best suit. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the audience wiped their eyes. They rented a small house on the outskirts of the city, a place with a garden and a view of the hills. Josephine continued to work for the freight company, but she also started taking on private commissions again, making dresses for women who appreciated fine work. Samuel took a job managing a stable, work that let him be around horses again, which he had missed. Life was not perfect. There were hard days when Josephine remembered Winnetka and felt the old anger and hurt rise up. There were times when Samuel woke from nightmares about his father's death, and Josephine would hold him until the memories faded. But they faced these struggles together, and somehow that made them bearable. One evening, about 6 months after their wedding, Josephine received another letter from Winnetka. She almost did not open it, afraid of what new poison it might contain, but curiosity won out. The letter was from the woman who had written before, the one who had been kind. She wrote that the truth had finally come out. Thomas Brennan, tired of the rumor that would not die and the pain it was causing his wife, had demanded that Margaret Thornton either provide proof of her accusation or publicly admit she had been mistaken. Cornered, Margaret had finally confessed that she had never actually seen Josephine with Thomas. She had only repeated gossip she had heard, gossip that turned out to be completely fabricated. The confession had caused a scandal, and Margaret's standing in the town had been severely damaged. People were talking about how she had destroyed an innocent woman's reputation out of spite. "Does this make you want to go back?" Samuel asked when Josephine showed him the letter. Josephine thought about it, really thought about it. Part of her wanted vindication, wanted to return to Winnetka in triumph and make everyone see that she had been right all along. But a larger part of her recognized that she had built something better here, something real and lasting. "No," she said finally. "Winnetka is my past. This is my future. Those people do not matter anymore. You matter. Our life together matters. Everything else is just noise." Samuel pulled her close. "I am proud of you," he said. "It takes strength to let go of anger like that." "You taught me that," Josephine said. "You showed me that moving forward is better than looking back." 2 years after they married, Josephine gave birth to their first child, a boy they named James. He had Samuel's gray eyes and Josephine's dark hair, and he was the most beautiful thing either of them had ever seen. Samuel held his son with such wonder and care that Josephine fell in love with him all over again. "I am going to be a better father than mine ever got the chance to be," Samuel whispered, looking down at the tiny face. "I am going to make sure he knows he is loved and valued every single day." "You will be a wonderful father," Josephine said, exhausted but happy. "Just like you are a wonderful husband." They moved to a larger house when James was 6 months old, a place with more room and a bigger garden. Stephen offered Samuel a partnership in the freight company, recognizing his brother's business sense and his way with people. Samuel accepted, and the company continued to grow. Josephine reduced her hours working for the freight company so she could spend more time with James, but she continued to sew. She found she enjoyed making children's clothes now, tiny dresses and little suits, and she often made extra to donate to families in need. When James was 2, Josephine became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Rose. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos and love, and Samuel thrived in it. He was patient with the children, gentle but firm, and he taught them by example to be kind and honest. "I cannot believe this is my life," Josephine said one evening when all 3 children were finally asleep. She and Samuel were sitting in their small parlor, her head resting on his shoulder. "5 years ago, I thought my life was over. Now I have everything I ever dreamed of and more." "We have been blessed," Samuel agreed, "but we also worked for it. We did not let the hard things break us. We chose to build something better." "Do you ever think about Winnetka?" Josephine asked. "Sometimes," Samuel admitted, "but not with anger anymore. I think about it and I am grateful in a strange way. If Margaret Thornton had not lied about you, if the town had not turned against you, we never would have met. I would still be drifting from ranch to ranch, alone and lonely. And you would be in that dusty little town, working your fingers to the bone for people who did not appreciate you. That is a very optimistic way of looking at it, Josephine said, but she was smiling. I am a very optimistic man, Samuel said. At least I am now. You made me that way. As the children grew, Samuel and Josephine made sure to teach them about kindness and truth. They told them age-appropriate versions of their story, about how lies can hurt innocent people and how important it is to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. Emma was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and getting into adventures. Rose was gentle and artistic, spending hours drawing and painting. Samuel and Josephine loved all three fiercely and equally, marveling at how different they were from each other, and yet how perfectly they fit into their family. The freight company continued to prosper. Stephen and Samuel expanded the business, adding new routes and services. They employed dozens of people, and they made sure to pay fair wages and provide good working conditions. It became known as one of the best places to work in San Francisco, and they never lacked for reliable employees. Josephine's sewing business also grew. Word spread about her skill, and soon she had more commissions than she could handle. She started training other women, teaching them advanced techniques and helping them start their own businesses. It gave her deep satisfaction to help others the way Samuel had helped her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Josephine back to the bench where he had proposed. The city had grown and changed around them, but the view of the bay was still beautiful. I have been thinking, Samuel said, holding her hand, about how everything turned out. About how one lie almost destroyed you, but how it also brought us together. And I realized something. Margaret Thornton did not have the power she thought she did. She could lie and spread poison, but she could not actually break you. You were stronger than that. You survived, and you built a beautiful life in spite of her. Josephine leaned her head on his shoulder. I could not have done it without you. Maybe not, Samuel said, but I could not have done any of this without you either. You taught me that it is okay to stay in one place, to put down roots, to let yourself care about people. Before you, I was just running from place to place, never letting anyone close because I was afraid of being hurt again. You showed me that taking that risk is worth it. So we saved each other, Josephine said. I suppose we did, Samuel agreed. And I would do it all again, every difficult mile, every hard choice if it meant ending up here with you. They sat together as the sun set over San Francisco, two people who had found each other in the midst of chaos and built something lasting from the wreckage. Behind them, their children played in the garden of their home, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Years continued to pass with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. James went to university and studied law, determined to help people who had been falsely accused, inspired by his parents' stories. Emma surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, channeling her wild energy into helping children learn. Rose opened an art gallery, showcasing the work of local artists and becoming a respected figure in San Francisco's cultural scene. Samuel's hair turned silver, and Josephine's developed streaks of white, but they still looked at each other with the same love and wonder they had felt those first tentative days in San Francisco. They became grandparents when James married a kind-hearted woman named Catherine and had 2 children of his own. Emma followed a few years later with 3 boys who inherited her fearless nature. Rose married another artist, and they had a daughter who showed early signs of remarkable talent. The freight company passed fully into Samuel's hands when Stephen retired, and he ran it with wisdom and compassion. He never forgot what it was like to be powerless and falsely accused, and he made sure that everyone who worked for him was treated with dignity and respect. Josephine continued to sew, though her fingers were not as nimble as they once were. She specialized now in wedding dresses, and brides came from all over California to have her create their gowns. Each dress was a work of art, stitched with love and care, and Josephine took deep satisfaction in helping young women start their married lives with something beautiful. One autumn evening, when they were both in their 60s, Samuel and Josephine sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their grandchildren were inside with their parents, the house full of noise and life. "You have any regrets?" Josephine asked, taking Samuel's hand. Samuel thought about it carefully, as he always did. "I regret what happened to my father," he said. "I regret that I could not save him, and I regret that you had to go through the pain of being falsely accused in Winnetka. But I do not regret anything that came after. Every choice we made, every step we took brought us here. How could I regret that?" "I do not regret it either," Josephine said. "Not anymore. There was a time when I was so angry, so hurt by what Margaret did. But now I see that she gave me a gift, even though she did not mean to. She pushed me out of a small, limited life and into something bigger and better. She thought she was destroying me, but she actually set me free." "You set yourself free," Samuel corrected gently. "You had the courage to leave, to start over, to trust me even though you had no reason to. That was all you." "We set each other free," Josephine said. "That is what love does, is it not? It gives you the courage to be more than you thought you could be." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I love you, Josephine Reeves. I loved you from the moment I saw you sweeping up that broken glass in your shop, refusing to let them break your spirit. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Samuel Reeves. My protector, my partner, my home." They sat together as the light faded, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. The business they had grown, the children they had raised, the community they had become part of, all of it was a testament to what could be created from determination and love and the willingness to help a stranger in need. Inside, their daughter Emma called out that dinner was ready, and the family began to gather around the table. This was their tradition now, Sunday dinners with everyone together, 3 generations sharing food and stories and laughter. As Samuel and Josephine walked inside, hand in hand, they passed a framed photograph on the wall. It had been taken on their wedding day, 2 young people with uncertain futures gazing at each other with hope and love. Looking at it now, Josephine marveled at how far they had come, how much they had built from such difficult beginnings. The dinner was loud and cheerful, with the grandchildren competing for attention and the adult children sharing news of their lives. Samuel sat at the head of the table with Josephine beside him, and he looked around at the faces of the people they had brought into the world, directly or indirectly, and felt profound gratitude. After the meal, James stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To my parents, who taught us that integrity matters more than reputation, that kindness is always the right choice, and that real love is built on respect and partnership. Everything I am, everything all of us are, comes from the foundation you built. Thank you for showing us what it means to live with honor and courage." Everyone raised their glasses, and Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you," he managed to say, "but you all did the hard work yourselves. Your mother and I just tried to point you in the right direction." "You did more than that," Emma said. "You showed us what was possible. You showed us that even when the world seems cruel and unfair, you can still choose to be good. You can still choose to help others. You can still build something beautiful." Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Samuel and Josephine prepared for bed. It was a routine they had followed for decades, comfortable and familiar. Josephine brushed out her hair while Samuel removed his boots, and they moved around each other with the ease of long practice. "It has been a good life," Josephine said as they settled into bed. "The best life," Samuel agreed, pulling her close. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Do you think Margaret Thornton ever realized what she did?" Josephine asked. "Not just the harm she caused, but also the good that came from it inadvertently." "I doubt it," Samuel said. "People like that rarely see beyond their own grievances, but it does not matter." "She does not matter, not anymore. She is just a footnote in our story, a catalyst that set everything else in motion." "I hope she found peace eventually," Josephine said. "I hope she learned to be better." "That is very generous of you," Samuel said. "You taught me to be generous," Josephine replied. "You taught me to let go of anger and embrace what is good in life. That is your greatest gift to me, Samuel. Not safety or security, though you gave me those too, but the ability to forgive and move forward. That is what changed my life." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, two people who had weathered storms and come out stronger on the other side. The years rolled on with steady grace. Samuel eventually retired from the freight company, turning it over to James, who proved to have inherited his father's business acumen and his commitment to fair dealing. The company continued to thrive under his leadership, becoming one of the largest freight operations on the West Coast. Josephine finally put away her needles when arthritis made sewing too painful, but she stayed involved in the sewing school she had established, mentoring young women and sharing her knowledge. She had trained dozens of seamstresses over the years, many of whom had gone on to successful careers of their own. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a grand party. Over 100 people attended, employees and friends and neighbors, all of them wanting to honor the couple who had touched so many lives. There were speeches and toasts, and more than a few tears. Samuel stood up, his hand trembling slightly as he raised his glass. "50 years ago," he said, "I met a woman who was in trouble through no fault of her own. I like to think I helped her, but the truth is, she saved me. She took a drifting cowboy with no roots and no purpose, and gave him a reason to stay in one place, to build something, to be part of something bigger than himself. Every good thing in my life flows from that moment when I decided to help her, when she decided to trust me. Josephine, my love, you are my heart and my home. Thank you for 50 years of grace." The room erupted in applause, and Josephine stood, tears streaming down her face. Samuel took her in his arms and kissed her, and their children and grandchildren cheered. It was a perfect moment, the culmination of a life built on love and trust and mutual respect. As the party continued around them, Samuel and Josephine stood together, holding each other close, grateful for every moment they had shared. When they were both in their 70s, Samuel developed a lingering cough that worried Josephine. The doctor said his lungs had been weakened by years of breathing dust on cattle drives and in freight warehouses. He would need to take it easy, to rest more and work less. Samuel was not happy about slowing down, but Josephine was firm. "We have more years ahead of us," she told him, "but only if you take care of yourself. I am not ready to lose you yet." So Samuel rested, and Josephine nursed him with the same fierce devotion he had shown her all those years ago. Slowly, his strength returned, and though he never fully recovered his old vigor, he learned to adapt. They took long, slow walks together through the city they had made their home. They sat in the garden and watched the seasons change. They visited with their children and grandchildren and reveled in the chaos and joy of family. One afternoon, as they sat together in their garden, Josephine said, "I have been thinking about writing our story down, not for publication, but for the family." So the grandchildren and great-grandchildren will know where they came from, what we endured, how we found each other. That is a fine idea, Samuel said. But make sure you tell the truth. Do not romanticize it. Let them know it was hard and painful and uncertain. That way, when they face their own hard times, they will know that they can endure too. So Josephine began to write. She filled notebook after notebook with the story of their lives, from the false accusation in Winnetka to their flight to San Francisco, from their courtship to their marriage to the building of their family and their business. She wrote about the pain and the joy, the fear and the courage, the despair and the hope. When she finished, she read it aloud to Samuel, and he listened with tears in his eyes. "You captured it perfectly," he said. "Every difficult moment, every triumph, this is our legacy, Josephine. Not just the business or the children, but this story. The proof that love and decency can overcome even the worst lies and cruelty." They bound the notebooks into a leather volume and presented it to the family at Christmas. Their children and grandchildren read it with wonder and pride, seeing their beloved grandparents in a new light, understanding for the first time the depths of what they had overcome. Samuel lived to be 83 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep, with Josephine beside him, his hand in hers. His last words were, "Thank you for the adventure, my love." Josephine mourned him deeply, but she did not fall apart. Samuel had taught her to be strong, to endure, and she honored his memory by continuing to live fully. She spent her remaining years surrounded by family, watching her great-grandchildren grow, sharing stories about the remarkable man she had loved. When Josephine died 5 years later, also peacefully in her sleep, the family buried her beside Samuel in the cemetery overlooking the bay. The headstone reads simply, "Josephine and Samuel Reeves, partners in life, united in love, forever together." At the funeral, James stood before the assembled crowd and said, "My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice made again and again every single day. It is choosing to help a stranger. It is choosing to trust when you have been betrayed. It is choosing to build something beautiful from the wreckage of your old life." They made those choices, and they showed us how to make them too. That is their true legacy. The freight company they had helped build continued for generations, always maintaining the values Samuel and Josephine had instilled. Fair wages, honest dealing, respect for all workers. It became a San Francisco institution, known for its integrity as much as its efficiency. The sewing school Josephine had founded continued as well, training women in a valuable trade and helping them gain independence and security. A scholarship fund was established in her name, providing opportunities for women who might not otherwise have access to such training. But perhaps their greatest legacy was their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, dozens of people who carried forward the lessons Samuel and Josephine had taught. To stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. To help those in need, even strangers. To build your life on truth and integrity rather than reputation and appearances. To love fiercely and completely, without reservation or condition. The story of the town that turned against her on a jealous lie, and the cowboy who took her somewhere safe and new, became a family legend, passed down through the generations. It was told to children who faced bullying, to remind them that they could survive. It was told to teenagers making difficult choices, to show them that integrity matters more than popularity. It was told to adults facing their own challenges, to give them hope that they too could overcome. And always, the story ended the same way. With two people sitting together in the fading light, hands clasped, surrounded by the life they had built from courage and love and the simple choice to help someone in need. A life that proved, beyond any doubt, that even the cruelest lie cannot destroy those who refuse to be broken, and that love, real love, can flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. From the ruins of a false accusation and a town's cruel judgment had come 55 years of partnership, joy, family, and purpose. From a moment of kindness had come generations of descendants who carried forward values of integrity and compassion. From two wounded people taking a chance on each other had come a love story that would inspire their family for 100 years and beyond. And if there was a lesson in it all, it was this: that the worst thing that happens to you does not have to define you. That strangers can become saviors, and saviors can become soulmates. That a fresh start is always possible if you have the courage to take it. And that love, true love, the kind that is built on respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day, can overcome anything the world throws at it. Josephine and Samuel Reeves had lived that truth, and in doing so, they had created something that would outlast them both, a legacy not of wealth or fame, but of love, integrity, and the unshakable knowledge that one person choosing to do right by another can change the entire course of two lives and countless others beyond them. Their story began with injustice and cruelty, but it ended with love and family and a life well lived. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.